My name is Olivia Parker. I'm 36 years old, and I live in Boston. I've been married to my husband, James, for almost 10 years. We met in college. He was the charming, confident guy in our literature class who always had a clever remark ready, the type of person who could make anyone laugh even on their worst day. I was quieter, more reserved, the kind of girl who observed everything, who noticed details most people missed. He noticed me. Not just that, he sought me out, asked me questions no one else did, smiled at me in that way that made my heart skip a beat. I remember the day he asked me out like it was yesterday. He approached me after class, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Olivia," he said, his voice calm but sincere, "I don't know how to say this without sounding like a cliché, but I'd love to take you out to dinner sometime. Just us." I laughed nervously, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. And just like that, our story began. Those early days were blissful. Late-night walks through the campus, sitting on library steps talking about everything from Shakespeare to the trivialities of student life. The way he made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered, every detail was perfect. After graduation, we stayed in Boston. James got a job in finance, while I pursued publishing. Our apartment was modest, 2 bedrooms, a living space that creaked in places, but it felt like home. We didn't have much money, but we had each other, and that was enough. We shared dreams. He promised me a life full of adventure, stability, and love. "One day, Olivia," he said, "I'll buy you that house with the white picket fence you always talked about." And I believed him because everything about James inspired belief. He worked hard, excelled in his career, and within a few years, we bought a beautiful suburban home, complete with a small garden, high ceilings, and windows that let in golden sunlight every morning. From the outside, we were the picture of happiness. The neighbors complimented our house, the friends envied our life, and strangers on the street would nod and smile, assuming we had everything figured out. But happiness is often a fragile facade. It began subtly. James started staying late at work more often, claiming client meetings or sudden deadlines. Initially, I didn't think much of it, he had always been ambitious. But then the small changes started adding up. The texts he used to send me in the morning, sweet messages wishing me a good day, vanished. His phone was always face down on the table. The subtle touches, the hand-holding, the warmth in his eyes, they slowly disappeared. When I asked about his day, he would respond tersely, almost robotic, "Fine. Busy. Tired." Excuses multiplied. "Olivia, I have a dinner with a client tonight, don't wait up. Flight got delayed, I'll be back late. I've got a last-minute meeting, you go ahead without me." I wanted to trust him, I wanted to believe him, but every fiber of my being began to tighten with suspicion. One evening, folding laundry, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I would never pry, never look at his messages. But something inside me, a gnawing instinct, made me glance. There was a text from an unsaved number. My hand shook as I opened it. "Can't wait for tomorrow night. Same place?" Time seemed to stop. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I didn't respond. I didn't confront him immediately. I needed proof. Absolute proof. I needed undeniable evidence before I accused the man I loved of betrayal. Weeks went by. I watched him with quiet precision. The client dinners were always on the same nights. He wore a cologne I hadn't seen in years. He smiled at his phone when he thought I wasn't watching. A slow, sinking feeling took root in my chest. My life, the one I trusted completely, was being unraveled. I knew then I had to act. That Friday evening, I told him I had a book club meeting. 10 minutes after he left, I got into my car. My heart raced, my stomach churned with anxiety and fear. I followed him downtown, weaving through traffic, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. He parked outside a restaurant, the kind with soft lighting and tablecloths so white they seemed blinding. I stayed back, invisible in the shadows, watching. And then I saw her. Sophie. Younger than me, maybe late 20s. Her hair flowed down her shoulders, her laughter was airy, flirtatious, the kind that could light up a room. And James? He smiled at her in the same way he once smiled at me, a smile full of warmth, adoration, intimacy. They walked hand in hand into the restaurant, oblivious to the world outside. I sat in my car, silent tears running down my cheeks. The memories of our life replayed in my mind, our wedding vows, our first apartment, our first house, the promises of forever. Every cherished moment felt like it had been stolen, replaced by lies. But after the heartbreak came something else, something stronger. Anger. I didn't just want to cry. I wanted him to feel this. I wanted him to understand the depth of betrayal. And I wanted him to be exposed, not secretly, not in whispers, but openly, where the world could see the truth. It was then I realized, I couldn't do this alone. A little research, some social media digging, and I discovered Sophie wasn't single. Her husband, David, worked in IT. A kind, unsuspecting man, completely unaware of the betrayal taking place in his life. I stared at his profile, thinking of the injustice, the quiet heartbreak he must feel if he knew. And then a thought hit me like lightning: what if I didn't just inform him, what if I brought him with me? Insane. Bold. Dangerous. Perfect. I contacted David. At first, he didn't believe me. How could he? A stranger calling to expose his wife's affair seemed absurd. But when I sent him the evidence, photographs from outside the restaurant, messages intercepted, small details he never knew, his face transformed from skepticism to shock, disbelief, and then rage. Together, we planned. I called the restaurant to reserve a table. Calmly. Even though my hands were shaking as I dialed. "Hi, I'd like to reserve a table," I said. "Yes, for two. Right next to the window, please." I knew where James and Sophie always sat. The trap was set, perfectly aligned. The days leading to the dinner were torturous. I barely slept. My mind raced with a storm of emotions: anxiety, fear, anticipation, dread, and a glimmer of triumph. Could I really walk into the restaurant and confront them both? Would I have the strength? The night arrived. I put on my best dress, made sure every detail of my appearance screamed confidence, and met David outside the restaurant. His expression was a mixture of sorrow, anger, and determination, perfectly mirroring my own. Together, we stepped inside. The soft music and clinking cutlery did nothing to soften the scene before us. There, in a corner, sat James in his tailored suit, that smug, charming smile I once adored, and Sophie, laughing, leaning toward him with a warmth I once thought was reserved for me. Our table was perfectly placed beside them. The air between us seemed to thrum with tension. James' eyes flicked toward us, confusion and suspicion crossing his face for a brief moment before he masked it with a smile. Sophie's eyes, however, widened, the first crack in their illusion of secrecy appearing. I sat, David by my side. My fingers trembled slightly, but my heart was steady. This was it, the confrontation, the reckoning. For several minutes, we all sat in silence, letting the tension thicken, letting the weight of truth settle. Then, as though summoned by an invisible cue, I stood, walking deliberately toward James' table, every step a calculated beat in the rhythm of justice. David followed, and together we positioned ourselves before them, visible, undeniable. James' smile faltered the moment he saw me. Sophie's face drained of color. Fear replaced her flirtation, uncertainty replacing her confidence. I spoke first, my voice calm but sharp, slicing through the quiet murmur of the restaurant. "James, we need to talk." He froze. "Olivia, this isn't." "It is," I interrupted, eyes locking onto his. "I know everything. Every late night, every lie, every stolen moment." Sophie opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing her before she could. I gestured to David. "And this is David," I said. "Sophie's husband. I thought you should meet the man who's been betrayed too." Sophie gasped, her face pale. "David, what, how?" David's expression twisted in a storm of heartbreak and anger. He stood, towering over them, his voice low but sharp. "Sophie," he said, "explain. Now." The restaurant had gone silent. Other diners were watching, their curiosity piqued, sensing the tension. James stammered, "Olivia, No, James," I said firmly. "You don't get excuses. You don't get to explain. Just face the truth." Sophie's hand shook as tears streamed down her face. I didn't mean to, it just..." David's voice cracked, "Stop. Stop lying to yourself and me." Olivia adjusted the strap of her purse, feeling a rush of anticipation mixed with a tremor of nerves. She glanced at David, who offered a reassuring smile, though she could see the tension in his jaw. They were parked just a block away from La Bella Vita, the upscale Italian restaurant where James had chosen to meet Sophie. The warm glow of the evening lights bounced off the polished windows, and Olivia could already imagine the laughter and clinking glasses inside, oblivious to the storm that was about to walk in. "Are you sure about this?" David asked quietly, breaking her reverie. His voice, low and steady, reminded her that she wasn't entirely alone in this risky venture. Olivia drew a deep breath. "Absolutely. We need to see it for ourselves before we make a move. Tonight, he doesn't get to play me for a fool." She gripped his arm slightly, seeking a fraction of comfort. The valet handed them the keys after taking David's coat, and the two of them walked toward the entrance, blending seamlessly with the other couples arriving for dinner. Olivia could feel the adrenaline pumping in her veins, every step toward the door heightened her senses. She had spent the past week planning this moment meticulously, choosing the table next to James's, timing the arrival, and preparing the perfect psychological impact. As they were seated, Olivia quickly scanned the restaurant. La Bella Vita had a refined, intimate atmosphere, with soft lighting that cast a golden hue across the dark mahogany furniture. The smell of fresh basil and garlic hung in the air, tantalizing yet inconsequential compared to the tension Olivia felt. There they were. James and Sophie, already laughing together, clearly relaxed, unaware of the scrutiny heading their way. James was mid-sentence, holding a glass of red wine, while Sophie leaned in, her smile bright, almost triumphant. Olivia's stomach twisted at the sight. This was a scene she had imagined countless times in her head, and yet reality, seeing them so casually comfortable, was almost unbearable. Olivia took a sip of her water, pretending to be engrossed in the menu while her eyes never left them. David, sitting beside her, followed her gaze and subtly nodded, acknowledging the plan without drawing attention. They had chosen the table carefully, it was close enough to overhear snippets of conversation, yet far enough to avoid suspicion. "So, what's our move?" David whispered, leaning toward her, his eyes scanning the room for any potential interruptions. Olivia's mind raced. "We wait for the right moment. He's enjoying the attention, thinking he's untouchable. Let him underestimate us, just like he always does." The waiter approached with a polite smile. Olivia ordered something light, a caprese salad, while David chose the seafood risotto. Neither of them truly cared about the food, they had come for one reason, to confront the betrayal head-on. Minutes passed like hours. Every laugh James and Sophie shared felt like a personal jab, a reminder of the deceit Olivia had uncovered. She had known something was off for months, the subtle texts, the late nights, the way he would brush off her questions. But seeing it in action, watching him lean in towards Sophie with a familiarity meant only for a spouse, it was a punch to the gut she hadn't fully anticipated. Olivia took another deep breath, steadying herself. "He's arrogant, David. He thinks he can hide this forever. But tonight, it ends differently." Her hand brushed against David's. He gave a subtle squeeze, reassuring her. She could feel the support, the silent solidarity. They were a team, and tonight, that team had the upper hand. James leaned back, laughing at something Sophie said, and Olivia caught the way his hand brushed hers, an intimate, careless gesture. She felt her jaw tighten, her teeth clenching as she fought the instinct to storm across the room immediately. Patience, she reminded herself. Timing was everything. They had done their homework. Olivia had memorized their usual routines, the times they preferred to dine out, even Sophie's favorite wine. This was about more than just a confrontation, it was about reclaiming control, asserting boundaries, and making James understand the consequences of his actions in a way words alone could never convey. Sophie's laugh rang through the room again, light and airy, completely oblivious to the storm approaching. Olivia could feel her blood boil, but she kept her composure, sipping water, feigning casual conversation with David. Then, the moment arrived. James leaned over, whispering something into Sophie's ear, and she giggled, tilting her head back. Olivia's heart raced, and she leaned slightly closer to David, whispering, "Now. This is the perfect moment." They rose, smoothly, as though leaving the table, and began walking deliberately past James and Sophie. Olivia kept her posture straight, her gaze fixed on them, her presence impossible to ignore. James looked up, his eyes widening in confusion and shock, while Sophie's smile faltered, sensing the sudden shift in the room's energy. Olivia paused just a foot away from their table. David stood beside her, his hand subtly brushing hers, a silent signal of support. Olivia's voice, calm but laced with an undeniable edge, broke the gentle hum of the restaurant. "Good evening, James. Fancy seeing you here," she said, her tone courteous yet charged. Sophie's hand instinctively went to her glass, as if to shield herself from the tension radiating from Olivia. James's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, fumbling for words. "Oh, Olivia. This isn't what it looks like." Olivia raised an eyebrow, a soft, almost imperceptible smirk curling on her lips. "Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks very much like exactly what it is. Dinner with your secret companion." Sophie's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her features. She glanced at James, then back at Olivia, and back at James again, realizing the predicament she had walked into. David, calm and composed, stepped slightly forward. "And I assume this is your husband, James," he said, his tone measured, almost surgical in its precision. Sophie's eyes flicked to him, recognition dawning, a new layer of confusion and fear etching across her face. James stammered, "David. I didn't." Olivia cut him off gently, but firmly. "We're not here to hear excuses. We're here to witness the truth, up close and personal. Isn't that right?" Her gaze locked with Sophie's, a silent but powerful communication passing between them. No words were necessary, Olivia had every intention of ensuring that Sophie understood the gravity of James's betrayal. The air between them crackled with tension, every other diner seemed oblivious, yet the energy around the table was palpable, a contained storm. James's hand trembled as he reached for his wine glass, but Olivia noticed it immediately. "Careful," she said softly, almost kindly, "wouldn't want to spill anything in front of an audience." Sophie shrank slightly, the earlier confidence evaporating. This wasn't a scene she had anticipated, the balance of power had shifted entirely. Olivia had orchestrated this moment with precision, every step calculated to maximize impact. A waiter passed by, sensing the unusual energy, and gave a polite, albeit cautious, nod to Olivia and David. Olivia responded with a calm smile, masking the internal fire that burned fiercely. Timing, she reminded herself, patience, strategic impact. James finally managed to find his voice, though it was thin, defensive. "Olivia, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Olivia replied, her voice even but firm. "I understand the late nights, the lies, the texts you thought I wouldn't see. And now I understand exactly what kind of person you are when you think no one is watching." Sophie shrank further into her chair, a mixture of embarrassment and fear crossing her features. Olivia let the silence stretch, letting the tension simmer, each second amplifying the psychological impact. David added softly, "And it seems your fun little dinner has some unintended spectators tonight." James's face turned pale, realizing that the situation had spun completely out of control. Every laugh, every whisper, every gesture he had shared with Sophie was now witnessed by both Olivia and David, a living testament to his betrayal. Olivia's eyes softened slightly, though only just. James, she said, leaning just a fraction forward, I didn't want it to come to this. But I also can't let it continue unchecked. You made your choices, and now so have I. Sophie finally spoke, her voice trembling. I didn't know. Olivia's gaze, sharp and unyielding, met hers. Didn't know? That's a convenient excuse. But ignorance doesn't absolve anyone. Not here, not tonight. The room seemed to hold its breath as Olivia and David remained poised, commanding presence and quiet authority radiating from them. Every diner, though focused on their own meals, could sense the undercurrent of drama, the charged atmosphere that made the ordinary restaurant feel like a stage set for reckoning. Olivia's mind raced, considering the next steps. This confrontation wasn't just about exposing James, it was about reclaiming her dignity, asserting control, and making the psychological impact unforgettable. James stammered again, searching for words. Olivia, please, let's talk, later. Olivia's smirk was barely noticeable, yet it conveyed everything. Later? No. Tonight, now, is the moment. You see, some lessons can't wait. And some truths must be faced head-on. Sophie's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass, now almost forgotten in the tension. Olivia's eyes followed, noting every subtle movement, every fleeting expression. This was as much about psychological precision as it was about confrontation. David leaned slightly toward Olivia. Are we doing this? He asked quietly, almost imperceptibly. Olivia nodded. Yes. Step by step. Control the narrative, control the room. With that, she stood fully, turning slightly to face both James and Sophie directly. The restaurant seemed to shrink around them, every sound fading except for the unspoken tension that hung like a thick fog. And then, in that moment, Olivia spoke the words that would forever change the dynamic at the table. You know, James, it's fascinating. All these months, all these little lies, and yet here you are, acting like nothing's wrong. But let me assure you, your little secret dinner isn't going unnoticed anymore. Sophie gasped softly, realizing the gravity of Olivia's words, while James sat frozen, words failing him entirely. The energy in the room shifted, electric and charged, as if the universe itself had paused to witness the reckoning. Olivia's eyes softened just slightly, the smallest flicker of the woman who had once trusted and loved James fully. I wanted to believe in us, James. I truly did. But some truths are unavoidable, and tonight is the moment they meet reality. David placed a gentle hand on Olivia's shoulder, a silent signal of solidarity, support, and shared purpose. Together, they were a united front, facing the betrayal, commanding the narrative, and ensuring the truth was undeniable. James finally found a whisper of words. Olivia. I didn't mean. Stop, Olivia interrupted, her voice calm yet authoritative. This isn't about excuses. It's about accountability, about understanding that every action has consequences. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, and she shrank back further into her seat. The illusion of control she had felt at the beginning of the evening had crumbled entirely. Olivia glanced at David, her silent partner in this intricate dance of confrontation. The moment was perfect, precise, and irreversible. And as Olivia's words hung in the air, the first tremors of James's realization began to settle in. The night was far from over, but one thing was clear, the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The next moves would determine the aftermath, the emotional fallout, and the irreversible consequences of betrayal exposed. But for now, Olivia and David held the room, the table, and the undeniable truth firmly in their hands, a living testament to courage, strategy, and the reclamation of dignity. Olivia felt her heart hammering in her chest as she glanced at David, who gave her a reassuring nod. They were seated at the table they had reserved meticulously, right across from James and Sophie. The dim, ambient lighting of the restaurant highlighted the elegant decor, but Olivia could barely focus on the aesthetic details. Her mind was entirely on the couple in front of her, the couple she had caught in countless lies, whose betrayal had left deep wounds. As she sipped her water to steady her nerves, she noticed James leaning in, whispering something to Sophie. They laughed softly, the kind of laughter that once would have made her feel insecure, but now only fueled her determination. She had rehearsed what she would do and say countless times, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the palpable tension in the room. David gently squeezed her hand under the table. "Ready?" he asked in a hushed tone. Olivia nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied every subtle movement of James and Sophie. She noticed the way Sophie's hand lightly brushed against James's arm, a gesture that was intimate and familiar. The sight made Olivia's chest tighten, but it also strengthened her resolve. Taking a deep breath, Olivia leaned slightly forward and called out, "James? Sophie?" Both of them turned, a flicker of surprise passing over James's face. Sophie's smile faltered just slightly, as if she sensed something was off. "Yes?" James replied cautiously, his tone polite but wary. "I hope you don't mind us joining you," Olivia said, keeping her voice steady, almost casual. "We couldn't resist the chance to share this lovely evening with you both." Sophie blinked, confusion evident in her eyes. "Oh, sure. Please, have a seat," she said, her voice tinged with hesitation. Olivia and David smoothly slid into the chairs across from them, the action deliberate, almost theatrical. Olivia's pulse raced, yet her outward demeanor remained calm, collected, and in control. The waiter appeared at that moment, taking drink orders, but Olivia waved him off with a polite smile. She didn't need distractions, all eyes were now on the table, on the tension that hummed like electricity in the air. So, Olivia began, placing her hands calmly on the table. "James, I hear you've been busy. Sophie tells me you've been celebrating something recently?" Her voice carried a subtle undertone of irony, almost teasing, but laced with sharp intent. James's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "Yes, we, had a little dinner." "Nothing major?" Olivia raised her eyebrows. "Nothing major, you say?" It looked rather special from the outside. "I must admit, I was curious enough to reserve a table across from yours tonight. I thought, why not experience the atmosphere up close?" Sophie's face turned a shade paler. Her fork hovered midair as she glanced nervously at James, who now avoided Olivia's gaze. Olivia's eyes locked with his, unwavering and steady. It was a silent challenge, she knew everything, and she wasn't afraid to show it. David reached subtly under the table, brushing Olivia's hand with his, offering support. She squeezed back gently. He knew her plan was not about aggression but exposure, a psychological revelation that would leave James and Sophie unnerved and humbled. "You see," Olivia continued, her voice soft but firm, "we couldn't help but notice how intimate you two seemed. The way you laughed, leaned in close, it's quite remarkable how chemistry works, isn't it?" Her smile was polite but sharp, her words measured to maximize the emotional impact. Sophie's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but the restaurant's layout made it impossible without attracting attention. James's fingers tapped nervously on the table, betraying the casual mask he tried to maintain. "Olivia," James began, but she cut him off gently, holding up her hand. "Please, allow me to finish. I wouldn't want to interrupt the moment. It's enlightening, really. I've learned a lot about relationships, trust, and honesty. Some lessons come the hard way, don't they?" The words hung in the air, dripping with subtle accusation, yet spoken with impeccable civility. Sophie swallowed hard, her lips pressed into a thin line. David's presence beside Olivia was reassuring. He had promised before they walked in that he'd back her every step of the way. And he was. "I'm sure you both think everything is perfectly fine, that your secret dinners and whispered conversations are hidden," Olivia said, leaning forward slightly, letting her eyes scan theirs. "But secrets have a way of becoming truths, don't they?" Sophie's hand trembled as she set down her glass. James opened his mouth to respond but found no words adequate. He realized the position they were in, the table had become an arena, and Olivia was holding all the power. "I remember when we first met," Olivia continued, her voice softening slightly, tinged with nostalgia. "I believed in you, James. I trusted you. And I loved you deeply. But love isn't just about feelings, it's about respect, honesty, and integrity. David's voice joined hers, calm but firm. It's also about standing up when someone wrongs you, Olivia. You've done that tonight, and we're not here to escalate, just to expose the truth. Olivia's words, combined with David's presence, created an almost suffocating tension for James and Sophie. They were caught, emotionally cornered, and powerless to defend themselves. The silence in the restaurant around their table was deafening, with a few curious glances thrown their way from nearby diners. Finally, James spoke, voice low, hesitant. Olivia. I can explain. You don't need to, Olivia interrupted, her tone calm but unmistakably cutting. Your actions speak louder than any excuses you could offer. And tonight, I just wanted to show you what it feels like to be watched, to be observed, and to have your deception laid bare. Sophie's lips quivered. I didn't know he was married, she whispered, but the guilt in her voice was thin and unconvincing. Olivia let the words hang in the air, letting Sophie feel the weight of every betrayal she had been a part of. Olivia leaned back slightly, her composure perfect. It's funny, she said, almost conversationally, how people assume secrecy protects them. But exposure doesn't need violence. Sometimes, all it takes is presence, awareness, and a reminder that someone knows. James's shoulders slumped, and Sophie's gaze fell to her plate. Olivia could see the realization dawning, their comfort, their confidence, their little secret bubble had burst, and there was no putting it back together. David reached out, touching Olivia's hand again, as if to anchor the moment. We're leaving tonight with clarity, he said. And perhaps this evening will remind you of the consequences of deceit. Olivia nodded, satisfied. She stood gracefully, her posture composed, as did David. James and Sophie's faces were etched with embarrassment and a subtle trace of fear. The restaurant staff looked on curiously, sensing the drama without understanding its full depth. As Olivia and David walked out, Olivia glanced over her shoulder. James's eyes followed her, a mixture of guilt, shame, and awe. Sophie avoided the gaze entirely, her hand clutching the table nervously. The lesson was learned, the truth revealed, and Olivia felt a sense of closure she hadn't known she needed. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around them. David smiled at Olivia, pride and love evident in his expression. You did it, he said softly. You confronted it, and you stayed true to yourself. Olivia exhaled, feeling a wave of relief. It wasn't about revenge, not really, she said, her voice calm. It was about reclaiming my dignity, showing them that deceit has consequences. That's all. David nodded. And in doing so, you've made a statement, not just to them, but to yourself. You've taken back control. They walked down the street together, the night alive with possibility. Olivia knew this chapter was closing, but life continued beyond this confrontation. She had faced betrayal head-on, with courage and dignity, and that strength would carry her into the future. As they disappeared into the night, Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The table reservation, the careful planning, the silent observations, all of it had led to this moment. She had not raised her voice, nor had she resorted to drama. Yet the impact was undeniable. Inside the restaurant, James and Sophie remained at their table, processing the encounter. The whispers of staff and curious diners had created an aura of subtle humiliation, a quiet exposure that was far more powerful than anger or confrontation could have been. James rubbed his temples, realizing the gravity of his actions. Sophie sat quietly, her mind racing with regret and shame. For Olivia, this night marked a turning point. It was not just a confrontation but a reaffirmation of her own values and resilience. She had turned betrayal into empowerment, secrecy into revelation, and pain into clarity. And as she walked home with David, the cool breeze brushing against their faces, Olivia felt an unshakable sense of peace. She had faced the truth, navigated the storm, and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life would present next. This night, with its careful planning and quiet courage, would be a story she would remember, not for the pain inflicted by others, but for the strength she discovered within herself.